If you think that Orphie needs her weapon or even energy regeneration in slot 6, not necessarily. In fact, running attack percent in slot 6 might actually be a better choice for you and can in fact be even or possibly be even ahead over energy regeneration. With nuance, that is, of course. And if you intend on playing Orphie with Seed and expect her to be a fully inactive unit you can ignore entirely while she battery Seed, that ain't fully correct either. She needs much more field time than you might realize. And to make sure that you find the perfect build and playstyle for your Orphie today, let's talk about her kit and how she plays her best weapons, disk drives and disk drive sets, her main and substats, why attack and ER in slot 6 might not be too different after all, her teams and Mindscapes, and lastly, let's also talk about her pros and cons. Welcome, iamrivenous, and this is your complete XXL in-depth guide to Orphie, Magnuson, and Magus. Orphie is an aftershock-based fire attacker who specializes in dual attacker comps similar to Seed and provides a lot of damage while inactive, quick assists, and buffs to not only herself but also the team. While Orphie's kit might first suggest that she is entirely off-field, you will notice very quickly that is actually not the case, and especially not when paired with Seed. So let's begin and talk about her kit. Orphie has a 5-part basic attack string and we will never use them. She then also features a Fireblade attack that can be manually triggered after a basic 5 or regular EX special, and although likely we won't really use this either, there is an argument to be made for it to be used when short of just a little bit of energy. Her dodge counter dash attack, quick assist, regular special and assist follow-up either don't matter and will also hence never be used, or they do what they are supposed to do and hence we will skip them. Her chain attack also does what a chain attack is supposed to do, but using it will not only generate 266 decibels, but also 20 bottled heat. And speaking of which, bottled heat is her unique resource and as per usual is displayed below her HP bar. Bottled heat caps out at 125 points and we require 100 of it to cast her EX special Heat Charge, which I will simply refer to as EX Laser. Holding down her EX special button with 100 or more bottled heat will consume 100 of it to then cast said EX Laser. This will trigger a quick assist to the next unit in the lineup nearly instantly, so make sure to position your Seed or Soldier 0 MB after your Orphie, unless paired with Astra. If Orphie is attacked during the charge up or when firing, the incoming attack will be parried as well, and after the laser ends, she will then automatically cast her EX special Fury Eruption. Fury Eruption deals some additional damage and that's honestly about it. However, because this Fury Eruption has her linger on the field for a relatively long time, that also makes you unable to switch back to her, as seen in the footage right here. And by relatively long, I mean around 8 seconds. This is in fact extremely long and you will also probably run into swapping problems somewhere due to this. While Orphie is off-field, she will automatically cast her special Corrosive Flash every 5 seconds during ally attacks. However, in reality, because this requires, well, said ally attacks, it becomes much closer, triggering every 5.2 to 5.4 seconds rather than exactly 5. Which also is only partially true because you will switch into her, which then prevents this from triggering someone. Realistically, you can and should expect around 20 per fight, or about 1 every 9 seconds. This off-field special is an aftershock attack which will hit for 4 times and restore 20 bottled heat as well. As for the topic of Severed Innocence, because you can only acquire 1 stack per skill, and the type, which here is the special, takes priority over the subtype, the Aftershock, she will obtain 1 stack from this and can obtain a second one from her other Aftershock attacks. More on this in just a bit. If Orphie is off-field and her current energy is 60 or higher, she will then consume 30 energy to cast her EX special Crimson Vortex instead of her regular off-field special. This off-field EX special will also restore 20 bottled heat, and except for dealing more damage, there is not really much of a difference to her regular off-field aftershock special. If you swap into Orphie during either off-field aftershock, she will finish it first, which might delay your health EX and can also cause some problems, as you will see later during the gameplay breakdown. Lastly, as for her fourth and last EX special, it requires 30 energy, and when pressed while she is on field, she will deal some damage. On top, according to the skill description, after using the skill, immediately follow up with a powerful fire blade from the basic 5. Even though it does say immediately here, this can be somewhat misleading, as it will not actually activate automatically, and does indeed require a manual basic attack input to actually cast the fire blade attack afterwards. This can be best seen in the footage, as swap cancelling it or simply not pressing her basic will simply, well, not cast her basic attack fire blade. However, unless you actually do need the energy, the best optimal play here is to actually just not do the basic fire blade and instead swap cancel the initial EX cast. Which brings us back to the topic of Severed Innocence. While it is in theory possible to maintain 3 stacks on it, we will either have to weave in a manual basic attack every 30 seconds or make sure to not actually swap cancel her regular EX special too early and use the fire blade. However, we are also only missing out on 10% crit damage by doing so, which is not really the end of the world. The LDR being, I think 2 stacks are more realistic, but 3 are at least in theory possible. Anyway, let's continue with her kit. Using your health EX special laser right after her regular EX special will skip the wind up or parry animation of the health EX, which makes this feel just a little bit tad faster than simply holding your EX down, and if you have the energy to do that, I personally would recommend doing so. Her ultimate is effectively just Burness's ultimate. We jump into the air, trigger quick assist, and if we use that quick assist, she will fire for longer and inflict more damage, daze, and anomaly. Unfortunately for us, it kinda does no daze or anomaly application whatsoever, so the primary use here really is mainly the quick assist as well as the 20 bottle teat and some good damage. While her ultimate damage multiplier does look somewhat low on paper, please keep in mind that her ultimate does count as an aftershock as well, and hence gains her inherent 85% aftershock damage bonus from her core. But Riv, we never talked about her core. That assessment would indeed be correct, so let's do that. First up, Orphie gains a 25% crit rate as well as said 85% aftershock damage. This is important to keep in mind because her core also specifies that essentially all of her used skills aside her assist follow-up are considered aftershocks. This includes all of her EX specials, her basic fire blade, her chain, and her ultimate. Furthermore, it then explains what bottled heat is, and lastly casting her health EX special Heat Charge, again that is the laser, will then also provide a buff to the team called Zeroed In. Zeroed In provides a flat 280 combat attack, increasing by 20 for every 0.1 initial energy regeneration she has above 1.6 and caps out at a maximum of 700. As somewhat common by now, without her signature it is literally impossible to max out this buff, but as per usual it is also not required and we will talk more about this in just a bit. In fact, it can probably sometimes be better to just not max this out. Zeroed In lasts for 12 seconds by default, and if the agent triggers an aftershock, they will extend their own Zeroed In by 4 seconds for a maximum of 20 seconds. This effectively means for frequent aftershock attackers, the maximum duration is 32 seconds, while the likes of Seed and Soldier 11 are stuck at 12 seconds. This will become important later on because this simply means that it is impossible to maintain 100% uptime on this buff on Seed for the full stun window without refreshing it mid-combo, which requires quite an effort in terms of planning that frankly 99.9% of players will simply not do. It is also important to note that the laser constantly refreshes the buff while it is still being cast, so the actual buff duration is closer to 15 seconds rather than 12 seconds. Lastly, for her additional ability, we require either a stun or a support character, and if that condition is fulfilled, all aftershock damage dealt while buffed by Zeroed In will also ignore 25% of defense. This is fantastic for Sanbi and Trigger and not so much for Seed. To end the kit overview, given the substantial amount of EX specials in her kit, it is hopefully to nobody's surprise that a large portion of her damage comes from her EX specials and specials, with the proportion being somewhat lower in non-seed teams. But because of that, this leaves her skill priority at core and EX special, into chain, into assist and basics, and lastly dodge. We can leave her dodge at level 1, and if you are short on resources, that also applies to her assist follow-up and even basics. Let's talk a bit more about energy regeneration on Orphie, as well as what to take care about when playing with Seed. First up, Orphie's buff scales of initial energy regeneration, and that means secondary effects, such as Housekeeper's off-field energy regeneration, do not work for her core. That also means outside of her signature, Anton's weapon Drill Rig is the only other choice she has in terms of acquiring said initial energy regeneration. Next, let's do a little bit of math, shall we? Her talent provides her 0.36 flat energy regeneration, which leaves her base at 1.56 ER. With a 60% ER main stat in slot 6, 20% from a 2-piece Swing Jazz or Lullaby, and 60% from her signature, that leaves her at 3.744 energy per second. When paired with Seed, Seed provides an additional 2 flat energy approximately every second to her, which means she generates about 5.744 energy per second, and that in turn means she can, in theory at least, cast her off-field special once every 5.22 seconds. So you may think this means she's ideal for C teams because she would be constantly generating steel charge, right? In practice, however, this doesn't hold true. As you might or might not know, if you have read Seed's core skill, you will notice this little but quite important keyword here: active. Seed only gains steel charge if Orphie is the active on-field character when spending energy. That means for optimal steel charge generation, we rarely want her to actually cast her off-field EX special, and in turn our gameplay goal with Orphie when played with Seed is actually swapping her in as much as possible and try to cast as many regular EX specials as we can. But due to enemy mechanics and her insanely long linger after her LTX, this is not always possible, and due to that it is extremely easy for her to actually overcap on energy, and hence also completely waste it. Furthermore, Orphie's buff will only last for the previously mentioned 12 to 15 seconds on Seed, and due to the inherent 5-second cooldown of her off-field attacks, she cannot ever maintain 100% uptime on it, unless you actively use her regular on-field EX special. And having that said, this has actually a major implication. Because if you are running her signature, running attack percent in slot 6 over energy regeneration might actually just simply give you better results. Due to how her energy breakpoints and off-field EX aftershocks cooldown timings work, this is worth it if you are, first up, not fully utilizing said buff anyway, and secondly, not frequently swapping to her to spend her energy manually, because Orphie's aftershocks do absolutely nothing for Seed, and any energy regeneration on her is completely wasted if you don't use it to generate steel charge for Seed. In practice, I've gotten very similar results for both ER and attack percent in slot 6 against various bosses. You can see some of my personal results on screen right now. And that brings us to the last point. Let's talk about where Seed and Orphie synergize and where they don't. Outside of Orphie providing up to 700 flat combat attack to Seed, she can, in theory, also funnel 15 steel charge to Seed every few seconds, but again this requires you to be active. Since Seed does not have any aftershocks, the buff will not last long enough on Seed to maintain 100% uptime, as she has no way of extending the buff. Furthermore, her additional ability does absolutely nothing for Seed because, well, Seed does not have aftershocks. Secondly, Seed's buff disappears after 3 seconds when switching out or when Orphie becomes off-field, which means Orphie will actually not have Seed's buff active for most of her off-field aftershocks. But if you play them together, she should optimally just do her on-field EX instead regardless, which then would be buffed in turn. TLDR being, Orphie has to give up quite literally everything that makes her unique to support Seed. But because of Orphie's personal damage as well as the attack buff she provides, Orphie can still be the best partner Seed has, if you actively use her on-field EX as much as possible and plan your buffs around Seed's burst window, aka the big punch. I know I am repeating myself a lot here, but I really want to drive this home. When paired with Seed, Orphie is not a brain-dead off-fielder and you need to actively use your on-field EX special as much as possible. Yo, post-editing riff here. For some reason I forgot this kinda pretty important thing, but Lin Null reminded me of this, so credits to him, go and check out his channel, a link is in the description. Since Orphie X only provides 15 steel charge to Seed and not the usual 30, and given a classic Seed stun window combo, that also means you will now need 136 steel charge on her when entering the stun window instead of the previous 121. Orphie does not really have combos, so instead I will walk you through some gameplay. I am trying something new here for these type of characters, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Here I begin the fight on Trigger with 4 shots to build her purge, then instantly swap to Orphie and ignore the quick assist from Trigger. On Orphie I hold down her EX for the attack buff, then use the quick assist to seed into her punch and follow up with a full combo. This leaves us just short of a little bit of charge, so I try to dodge the bullets for a dodge counter before we go for her big punch. I then swap cancel the punch into Trigger, use her EX special and swap cancel that one as well to go to Orphie. Now I use her EX special twice for 3 reasons. First, I want to get the impair on Orphie here for the additional 1000 decibels as we will need it later. Secondly, I need 40 additional bottled heat in preparation to reapply her buff, and lastly to funnel 30 steel charge to Seed. If I don't do this here, I will not have enough bottled heat to reapply Orphie's buff mid-stun for Seed, as well as also being short 30 steel charge on Seed, which would be bad. I then switch back to Seed and go for a full basic combo into her EX special. We are now at 119 steel charge on Seed and our Orphie has enough heat, so I can now switch to Orphie to reapply her buff, then use her quick assist to Seed for the missing steel charge and then go for her big punch. I switch immediately out of the punch again back to Orphie 2 EX specials to refill bottled heat as well as gaining enough decibels for her ultimate. Then I use her ultimate and quick assist back into Seed. I use her EX special and trigger the stun. I select Trigger here to apply King of the Summit, then select Seed and cancel the chain. I will need 1 basic to have 120 steel charge, so I do that, then go for her big punch and switch into Orphie to reapply the buff before Seed's big punch hits. Lastly, I use her quick assist back to Seed, go for Seed's ultimate, and then finish the stun combo. The takeaway here essentially is, when playing with Seed, we will need to carefully plan around her active EX usage to make her a good and effective partner for Seed. If we are playing with Soldier 0 MB instead, we can honestly just ignore her existence, for the most part that is. As far as I am concerned, from testing her for over 50 hours in various teams and talking with other creators, Orphie requires about 80% energy regeneration to be able to maintain her buff for both Soldier 0 MB and Seed, and 140% ER to max out her buff. That means we have 3 possible build options, with all of them looking at the 2-piece energy regeneration set. Means we can either pair her signature with said 2-piece and attack percent in slot 6 for 80%, or with ER in slot 6 for 140%. If you don't have her signature, you are always looking at energy regeneration in slot 6. As for my personal recommendation, you go for attack percent in slot 6 if you are either low or highly skilled, and ER in slot 6 if your skill level is somewhat in the middle or if you don't have her signature. I know it sounds weird to make this dependent on your skill level, but bear with me. The reasoning here being, if you are a highly skilled player and can work around the lower energy income with attack percent in slot 6, but still generate enough resources for more enhanced basics on Seed, attack wins out overall, depending on the fight that is of course. Since her off-field aftershocks do absolutely nothing for Seed while also being unbuffed, ER is literally a waste in this case. If you are lowly skilled or simply don't want to sweat as much, I will get that as well, and plan on just simply not swapping her in at all and simply rely on her off-field aftershocks, attack percent will win out as well, since those now simply deal more damage and you will not as easily overcap on her energy, and also if you don't use the buff in the first place, the ER literally doesn't do anything. If your skill is somewhere in the middle ground, energy regeneration in slot 6 might be the winner, as you are likely not efficient enough in spacing your lower energy income effectively to always have your buff active during Seed's burst windows. If you play with Soldier 0 MB instead of Seed, attack percent nearly always wins out, as Soldier 0 MB can extend her buff uptime, which works out just fine at 80% for a permanent uptime, as well as her aftershocks now being her primary source of damage. But just as with Seed, the difference isn't really that large. Both will work just fine for Zambi as well. That said, let's talk about her weapons, disk drives and main and substats. If you skipped directly here, go back one chapter and watch the energy breakpoint section first. It is important context on both her weapons and main stats, and I will not repeat myself. If you run her signature, well, it is her best in slot option and makes building her much easier due to providing her with 20% crit rate as well as 60% energy regeneration and up to 30% death shred for her aftershocks. With her signature, we are looking at crit damage in slot 4, fire damage or attack percent in slot 5 and optimally attack percent in slot 6. But energy regeneration works as well. As for the reasoning, watch the previous chapter. If paired with Seed or Astra, fire damage is the better choice. If paired with Soldier 0 MB and without Astra, attack percent wins out. Pen ratio is nearly always worse, and even more so when paired with Nicole or Trigger. Within a team context, her weapon choices look slightly less bad due to her dealing around 30 to 35% of the team's damage, with her contributing being just slightly higher in a Soldier 0 MB team. Because Anton's signature effect does literally nothing for her, giving up nearly 40% of her personal damage for an additional 150 flat attack is not worth it. Means literally any weapon is better than Drill Rig. Severed Innocence can be a bit better than shown here due to the reasons mentioned in her kit overview. With a crit rate weapon that is not her signature, such as Heartstring Nocturne, Myriad Eclipse or Marcato Desire, you are looking at crit damage in slot 4 with fire damage or attack percent in slot 5 and energy regeneration in slot 6. If you run a non-crit rate weapon such as Severed Innocence or Gilded Blossom, or a weapon that provides a low amount of crit rate such as Zenshin Herbcase, crit rate in slot 4, fire damage attack percent in slot 5 and energy regeneration in slot 6 are your best choices. Because her energy breakpoint is at around 80% and you can simply slot ER in slot 6 instead of attack percent, and her only contributing between 30 to 40% of the team's total damage, you don't actually need her signature, and it is honestly surprisingly skippable if you have other great alternatives such as Heartstring Nocturne, which conveniently reruns at the same time of her banner. For the 4-piece, you are looking at either a 4-piece Shadow Harmony or a 4-piece Astral Voice. When paired with Astra, who is holding Lullaby, Astral Voice will always be the better choice in terms of team damage. When paired with Trigger, there isn't much of a difference, and whether or not a 4-piece Astral Voice is the better choice will largely depend on how well you can maintain its stacks and make use of Trigger's quick assist techniques. For the ease of build, a 4-piece Shadow Harmony is generally the safest option, with Astral Voice being preferred for min-maxing. If you have a 4-piece Chaos Jazz with a lot of crit rate substats, well, she does do a lot of EX damage while inactive, so it is an option, and we also only swap her in pretty shortly. But because it requires you to have 6 more crit rate substat rolls for it to be even with a 4-piece Shadow Harmony, it will also nearly always be worse than the other two choices. Hence, I would not recommend it over the other choices, but I guess in theory it is an option. As for the 2-piece, we want to hit the 80% energy regeneration breakpoint, and hence either Lullaby or Swing Jazz are her best choices regardless. Focus on crit values and attack percent first and foremost, then flat pen and flat attack. Because flat pen is subtracted from the remaining defense after both defense shred and pen ratio have been applied, and Orphie has a lot of death shred in her kit signature as well as getting even more from possibly Trigger and Nicole, flat pen is actually a really good substat on her. As for a good endgame stat goal, you are looking at 12 crit rate, 12 crit damage and at least 4 attack percent substats. Keep in mind this can vary a little bit by weapon. Orphie gains 20% crit rate from her core passive, 20% from her signature if you have it, and 12% from Shadow Harmony. So if you run that layout, the maximum amount of crit rate you should aim for, as displayed in the stat screen, is 43%. Without her signature, this becomes 63%, and when running a 24% crit rate weapon, it becomes 39%. Aim for a 1:2 crit ratio with higher emphasis on crit rate when paired with Soldier Zero Ambi. Here are my recommended endgame stat goals as displayed in the stat screen. Pause or screenshot if you need to, and as per usual, higher is always better. Unless it is crit rate, as you don't really wanna overcap that one, of course. Orphie's Mindscape 1 grants her 15% fire with shred for her off-field special and EX specials and gives an additional 20% damage bonus to the team. This Mindscape is better for Soldier Zero MB teams as opposed to Seed teams due to the prolonged uptime on her buff and hence the additional damage bonus. Her M2 gives her 20% combat attack and allows for a guaranteed third ultimate, possibly even allowing for 4. The maximum decibels you can in theory obtain from this are 2925. Realistically, however, you can probably expect around 2500 to 2700 per deadly assault run. The actual value you gain from this will heavily depend on you, the team and the matchup, so don't take the number shown here for granted. Her M3 and M5 exist, and her M4 is especially good for C teams, and also does nearly nothing for Zambi teams. It does give her some more personal damage as well, however, and that is nice. As for her M6, it is one of the coolest Mindscapes we have had so far, well, at least in my opinion. It grants her a good increase in personal damage and more importantly allows her to use her off-field EX special after her basic attack Fireblade, which now allows you to play her on-field as main DPS. This Mindscape completely changes how she can be played, and while it does also give her a fair damage increase for the inactive classic Orphie as well, Kate will be very happy about this one. Orphie buffs aftershocks and so does Sanbi, with Orphie providing Death Shred for all aftershocks to the team, her own signature granting her another 30% and trigger signature, as well as Nicole also providing 25 and 40% respectively. The Death Shred stacking is real. Orphie and Soldier Zero MB work fantastic together and might literally just be the final missing member Sanbi has been looking for. While Electric and Fire don't necessarily share weakness and in fact are sometimes just resistant to each other, hello Pompey, the team just works super well together and plays very nicely. Orphie provides the field time Zambi needs while also granting her a variety of strong buffs. To me personally, Orphie Zambi Trigger felt like the strongest Soldier Zero team, with Nicole and Astra coming in second place. I believe Nicole has the highest potential, but you do need to be able to maintain her Death Shred uptime for this, and I personally just suck at this. When playing the team, make sure to always keep Orphie buff up, especially during the stun window. While Seed is not the best teammate for Orphie, Orphie is in fact the best teammate for Seed. Even though Seed does not have any aftershocks and generally their synergy is just not existent, Orphie's personal damage as well as the buff she can provide make up for this. For optimized gameplay, this team has a lot of nuance to it, and I highly recommend you to check out the Orphie Seed and ER section as well as the gameplay breakdown section for more information on this. It is quite important if you want to play the team to a higher potential. For the people who want to maintain the Soldier 11 agenda, yes, Orphie does work with her. I don't think she is Soldier 11's best partner, as her Daze and Anomaly Infliction basically just don't exist, but she enables a secondary fun dual DPS playstyle for Soldier 11 that is at least able to compete with other teams. If your name is Kate the 7th, 6th or also 8th, and you simply have a milk addiction, Hyper Orphie might be a thing for you, especially at Mindscape 6. While it also works at M0 and admittedly it was quite fun to play, she is designed as an inactive aftershock agent and it honestly is noticeable. All in all, Orphie's good team options are honestly somewhat restricted, and there is a large difference in her performance in Seed and Zambi teams when compared to her other teams. Yes, of course, you can play her with Evelyn, Nekomata and the likes, but personally I felt like rather than elevating these teams, Orphie is instead dragging them down when compared to their other options. Makes for a fun time though. Orphie will linger on field for a long time after her health EX laser, which can be a real pain to play around sometimes. She also requires much more field time when played with Seed if you want to optimize her and be a significant improvement over other options. That also means while she has a pretty low skill floor on a basic level, her skill ceiling is somewhere in the higher mid-range if you want to optimize her gameplay, which is especially true when paired with Seed. She is relatively easy to build as you can reuse old and already farmed sets such as Astral Voice or Shadow Harmony, and because 75% of her total damage is from her EX special and special, she does not really require high investment either and is pretty cheap in terms of her skill levels. While her signature allows for more flexibility and makes her easier to build, it is not needed. On the other hand, she is not fantastic as a main DPS, well, unless you M6 her, and as of right now, she really only has 2 good teams in Seed and Soldier 0 MB. And lastly, she also heavily likes either Astra or Trigger in the 3rd slot, albeit Nicole will fare pretty well as well if you can play her. 5,215 words later, and that wraps up the video. Thank you Hoyo for making her much more complicated than I want her to be. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end. If you already have watched the entire video, please consider leaving a like and a comment and let me know if you're pulling for Orphie or not. Don't forget to subscribe, join the Discord, and of course a special shout out to my Patreon members who make this kind of content possible. I appreciate all of you and I wish you a great day. Peace!
That's a hot to fight. I bet you know.